In 1893, amid the bustle of New York City, a young lady by the name of Carrie Astor got her hands on a thick envelope, scripted with her name in refined handwriting. Contained within was an invite to Mrs. William Ayres's yearly gala. She skipped any festivities. Instead, tears of gratitude flowed as her household had endured 6 months of anxious anticipation, fervent wishes, and constant mailbox vigilance. Her dad had amassed riches through rail lines, totaling $40 million, sufficient to claim ownership of nearly half of Manhattan. Yet wealth alone held no sway absent that coveted summons. Armed with it, Carrie stood poised for an advantageous union. Her father's commercial allies would finally pick up the phone. The family legacy would grace the appropriate publications linked to suitable philanthropies, murmured in elite parlors. Lacking it, they faced utter ostracism. His contacts would shun him. Carrie might stay single. Their assets would endure as tangible, but their standing in high society would evaporate like mist. This went beyond mere soirees. It hinged on influence. During Gilded Age America, entry into select gathering halls shaped marital prospects, sealed commercial pacts, and secured legacies for offspring. A solitary hostess's roster could elevate or shatter vast enterprises. Those cards didn't demand fortunes in production. They commanded fortunes in worth. And those who governed the doors to such venues wielded authority over America far surpassing any politician's reach. Prior to stepping into these bastions of dominance, should you relish these dives into the true machinations of the elite, kindly tap like and sign up for updates. With that, let's venture into the halls where destinies rose and fell on a mere gesture. The Astor Ballroom, where the figure 400 emerged as a symbol commanding the nation. Situated on 355th Avenue, it was a 4-story brownstone, solid yet ungrand, erected in 1862. It scarcely turned heads from the street until one held a pass to cross the threshold. Caroline Schermerhorn Astor, widely recognized as Mrs. Astor, resided there alongside her spouse William. Born into the Schermerhorn line, she embodied pre-revolutionary Dutch heritage. He arrived via Vanderbilt lineage as the Commodore's descendant who forged vast steamship and rail domains. Their union fused ancient pedigree with fresh opulence, yielding a force greater than the sum of its parts. Yet Caroline's real command stemmed from an overlooked structural trait. Her dance chamber accommodated precisely 400 souls, no more, no less, crammed in just right. Back in 1872, she launched her inaugural January affair. She summoned all of New York's key figures. They squeezed in, filling the space to its limits. The count arose by chance, a limit of the building itself. But Caroline, ever the shrewd tactician, spotted the potential. Rarity breeds desirability. Should access be open to all, it would signify little. However, with space for just 400 amid hordes of affluent clans craving validation, the summons turned into a treasure. Come the 1880s, the press dubbed New York's upper crust as the 400. The term transcended mere affluence. It denoted the exact 400 clans who could cram into Mrs. Ayres's chamber, that numeral shorthanded elite American circles. Ward Mallister, her social aide and gatekeeper, cemented it in 1888. He ran a roster in the New York Times, the genuine identities of the 400. Clans presuming inclusion found themselves omitted. Those in doubt saw their place affirmed on the page. Outrage erupted at once. Excluded groups railed against it. How could Mallister, basically a social coordinator, dictate societal worth? Yet their outcry only underscored his clout. Had the roster been irrelevant, their fury would have been absent. The brilliance of Caroline's approach lay in framing rejection as inevitable, not capricious. She avoided blunt rebuffs like, "You're not welcome." Instead, it was, "Regrettably, the room fits only 400, a matter of design." No offense intended. The recurring miracle that the identical 400 clans managed entry annually, while others stayed sidelined forever, that simply reflected the natural order. The venue itself stayed intentionally restrained. Free of lavish ostentation or bombastic splendor, it offered a balanced area with fine illumination and proper airflow. The goal lay not in dazzling with finery. The goal was mere presence. Caroline positioned herself at a designated spot close to the heart of it all, framed by her likeness, donning a diamond crown that sparkled from every direction. Not for showmanship, but for prominence. Amid 400 attendees, pinpointing her location was essential for all. The crown served as a signal, helping visitors map their bearings. Closeness to Caroline signaled status as unmistakably as badges denote rank in the armed forces. The galas adhered to rigid customs. Summonses dispatched in early January. Recipients enjoyed a fortnight to ready themselves. If none materialized by mid-month, it was a no-go. Certain households hovered by their letter slots, peaking repeatedly each day, optimism waning with each passing hour. The actual attending the affair felt like a draining performance in high society. Guests trickled in from 10 to 11 at night, waiting in line to be formally introduced. They'd edge toward Mrs. Astor, who might grant a brief 30-second chat or just a curt acknowledgement. Afterward, each person located their spot within the ballroom's unspoken social ladder. The core group represented the genuine upper crust. The intermediate ring held those who counted but weren't vital. The fringes housed the merest tolerables. People lingered for hours on end. Departing too soon came off as rude, yet hanging around until dawn could signal eagerness. Timing an exit demanded careful social math. Typically, clans slipped away between 1 and 2 a.m. once they'd gained enough exposure, but not so late that desperation showed. The next day's papers chronicled the notable attendees. No full rosters, of course, that would seem tacky, just the standout figures. Earning a mention proved you'd caught eyes, rivaling the event's mere presence in importance. Going unnoted despite showing up implied blending into obscurity. There in body, yet utterly forgettable. Come 1890, Caroline's New Year's gathering sealed one's position for all 12 months ahead. Deals in commerce sprang up among kin clustered in the innermost ring. Weddings got plotted between youths who crossed paths beneath Caroline's glittering lights. One night in those halls could chart a lineage's path for generations. Exclusion carried a tangible price. Clans barred from the 400-faced partners in trade who shied away from ties. Their girls drew slimmer suitor pools from lesser pedigrees. They retained fortunes, sometimes grander than the insiders. Yet socially, they were ghosts. A few pushed back, erecting grander estates, hosting flashier bashes, giving lavishly to causes. Success proved elusive. Caroline set the terms, with the key edict being her sole authority. Cash by itself couldn't secure a spot, nor could civic roles or triumphs in enterprise. Solely her nod counted, and she offered no reasons. The space at Fifth Avenue's ballroom stayed unpretentious, yet its proceedings wielded vast influence. Over 3 decades, that chamber dictated prominence in U.S. circles. It held 400 souls comfortably. All others stayed sidelined, regardless of their riches. The figure endured. Even now, 140 years on, quote tu Danus, evokes the pinnacle of exclusivity. The venue vanished, razed in the 1890s. But the framework Caroline forged there lingered. Then came the Vanderbilt uprising, as Alva boldly breached the barriers with opulence. March 26, 1883. Alva Vanderbilt issued calls for a masked gala at her fresh palace on 1660 Fifth Avenue. 200 summonses, marking the grandest, priciest festivity the nation had seen. One key figure got snubbed: Caroline Astor. This sparked outright conflict. Alva had wed Willie K. Vanderbilt, heir to the Commodore's line, back in 1875. For 8 years, she'd endured New York elites dismissing the Vanderbilts as awkward kin. Established clans like the Akes, Livingstons, and Schermerhorns voiced their scorn plainly. Vanderbilt wealth stemmed from rails, fresh fortunes, tied to trade. The Commodore? He'd started as a ferry operator, for heaven's sake. He swore like a deckhand and chewed tobacco. His wealth towered, but his roots were humble. Alva wouldn't settle for lesser footing. If the old elite ignored Vanderbilt invites, she'd stage an extravaganza so dazzling that all would plead for entry to hers. She'd compel recognition of Vanderbilt dominance. She hired Richard Morris Hunt to craft a residence dwarfing the Astor brownstone in scope. Hunt shaped a limestone French castle at 665th Avenue, right opposite where Caroline Astor's would rise. $3 million outlay, 58 rooms, each feature crafted to dazzle. The masked event launched the assault. 200 bids extended to all influencers, plus aspirants. Motif: continental kings and aristocrats. Attire demanded precise era fidelity and lavish spending. Alva planned to shine as a Venetian noble in a dress encrusted with genuine gems. The elite frenzy ignited over preparations. Households poured fortunes into outfits. Ladies sought scholars for historical fidelity. The soirée dominated chatter for months. Then Alva struck. Carolyn Astor's girl, Carrie, yearned to join. Her circle all had cards. Carrie had rehearsed the Star Quadrille, a routine with fellow debutantes set for the gala's stage. Yet the Astor household got no card. Carrie pleaded for her mother's aid. Carolyn grasped the ploy instantly. Alva aimed to extract Vanderbilt validation from her. For Carrie to savor the buzzed-about pinnacle of the season, Caroline would need to pay a ritual call on Alva, the protocol denoting acceptance. Carolyn weighed options: uphold dignity and bar her daughter from the year's centerpiece, or yield to Alva's gambit. She opted for practicality. Early in March, Caroline paid a visit to Caroline's stop at Alva's residence on 1660 Fifth Avenue, proved short, stiff, and amounted to total capitulation. By paying a visit to Alva, she was admitting that the Vanderbilts held the same standing in elite circles. Soon after, invites poured in for Caroline and her daughter Carrie Astor. The grand event lived up to every bit of its buzz, and then some. Over 1 in 200 attendees showed up in outfits that together ran more than $1 million. The mansion glowed under electric illumination, a novelty back in 1883. Blooms adorned every inch. An entire band performed live. Bubbly kept pouring right up to sunrise. Alva stepped out as a princess from Venice, her attire sparkling with gems and jewels. Fellow partygoers embodied figures like Marie Antoinette, Louisa Canaan, Catherine de' Medici, and assorted royal heads from Europe. The outfits were incredibly intricate, leaving some unable to take a seat. Folks remained on their feet for hours in dresses tipping the scales at 30 pounds. At the stroke of midnight, the Star Quadrille took center stage. Carrie Astor and her circle, costumed as celestial bodies, swirled in perfect sync amid roaring cheers. Alva had triumphed. With the Astor heiress shining at a Vanderbilt affair, it broadcast to high society that the old hierarchies were crumbling. The press dissected the occasion for weeks on end. The New York Times dished out vivid accounts of the ensembles. Harper's Weekly featured sketches. The whole extravaganza ran about $250,000, which adjusts to more than $7 million in modern terms, all for one evening's revelry. Yet the true price tag was influence. Alva had lavished her fortune to climb into the uppermost echelons. She had compelled Caroline Astor to recognize her presence. She had shown that fresh wealth, wielded with enough cunning and grandeur, could shatter the barriers of inherited privilege. That gathering set a risky example. Entry into the upper crust could be purchased, in a manner of speaking. You couldn't simply write a check to Caroline Astor and expect a seat at the table. But erecting a grander estate or staging a flashier soirée could drag the establishment into your orbit. Wealth, wielded boldly, had the muscle to topple walls deemed unbreakable. Caroline grasped the danger. Alva wasn't merely throwing bashes. She was proclaiming the Vanderbilt's parity with the elite, perhaps even supremacy. Suddenly, the brownstone at 355 Fifth Avenue felt downright modest. If the Vanderbilts boasted a chateau, Caroline would require her own. In under 10 years, she ditched that townhouse and hired Richard Morris Hunt to craft an even more opulent palace farther up the avenue. The escalation in building that Alva ignited would turn Fifth Avenue from a quiet neighborhood into a stretch of rivaling estates, where clans vied to eclipse one another with ever more outlandish flaunts of riches. Yet on that March evening in 1883, amid Alva's dance hall, encircled by revelers in finery worth more than a typical American's lifelong wages, the shift was unmistakable. The old codes had evolved. Legacy fortunes retained their weight, but emerging riches had mastered the rules, and at times the newcomers claimed victory. A single skirmish secured, though the larger conflict was only starting. The mergers forged in such salons. Joseph Pulitzer lingered in a shadowy spot of Mrs. Astor's dance hall come January 1889. noting how daytime snubs turned to polite nods over flutes of champagne from these same gentlemen. He knew the drill inside out. He'd funded his entrance and now aimed to reap the rewards. Pulitzer had snapped up the New York World in 1883, revamping it into the top earner among local papers. He'd amassed a fortune, but cash by itself hadn't unlocked this venue. He'd also given handsomely to charities dear to Caroline Astor. He'd backed initiatives Ward McAllister touted. He'd navigated the rituals shrewdly, buying his passage from foreign newcomer to reluctant member. Now mingling with the 400, he could finally engage the power brokers shaping New York's destiny, and they, tethered by the etiquette-demanding courtesy toward all at Mrs. Astor's gala, were obliged to converse. This was the true engine of Gilded Age commerce, not in cubicles or conference rooms, but in lavish halls where decorum mandated exchanges that daylight might never allow. Andrew Carnegie seldom graced these gatherings. He dismissed them as silly distractions, yet he made an appearance at Mrs. Astor's January affair in 1890 since key negotiators would attend. In that setting, where customs barred blunt deal talk, Carnegie could sidle up informally, chat about kin, journeys, culture, anything except commerce. Still, those exchanges nurtured bonds that sealed pacts valued in the millions. The tacit code held that overt business chat at parties was crass. But you cultivated the environment for it. You proved your fit, your grasp of manners, your reliability and refined company. Then, in the ensuing days or months when real talks kicked off, the foundation stood firm. J.P. Morgan elevated this tactic to an art. He showed up at select soirees not for idle chit-chat. He found most of the crowd dull, but to nurture ties, bolstering his financial domain. If observers had spotted you side by side at attending Mrs. Vanderbilt's soiree or mingling in the same elite group at Mrs. Astor's gala, made business overtures feel seamless and unthreatening rather than pushy. Those grand dance halls functioned as vital validation mechanisms. Venture prospects circulated exclusively within these tight-knit groups. Standing close to Mrs. Astor and inquiring about invitations to exclusive gatherings at the Vanderbilt estates meant gaining early insights into railway extensions, property ventures, company mergers, nothing like overt stock manipulation, which would come off as tacky. Merely casual hints that those in the know could profit from. Property transactions especially hinged on these dance floor ties. New York City was evolving from rows of modest row houses into a skyline of high-rises and office spires. Those with prior word on up-and-coming districts, the clans who showed up at the proper soirees, who secured advantageous financing for land buys, gentlemen whose spouses had charmed Mrs. Astor. Weddings, naturally, revolved around commerce. The 1895 union of Consuelo Vanderbilt and the Duke of Marlborough was a clear exchange. American capital for aristocratic lineage. Yet myriad subtler unions fulfilled comparable aims. A rail dynasty linking with a finance clan aligned their aims. A maritime wealth pool merging with an iron empire sparked efficiencies. High society galas brought youths together, though guardians selected guests via shrewd planning. The penalty for omission was stark. Barred from key venues, one couldn't forge the bonds essential for transactions. Commercial pursuits stayed siloed. Riches might abound, yet without entry to circles where chances flowed, expanding that fortune proved impossible. Harry Black amassed his wealth by grasping this interplay. He began in brick production, a solid but unremarkable trade. A smart match then unlocked elite gatherings. During a 1896 supper, he connected with George Fuller, a builder erecting Manhattan's pioneering towers. That link, enabled by societal links, sparked a collaboration birthing the Fuller Company, constructors of the Flatiron Building. Black's assets surged thanks to showing up at the fitting meal. At times, arrangements grew bolder. Exclusive venues like the Metropolitan Club or Union Club extended the gala ecosystem. Patrons could converse commerce candidly amid fellows screened via identical societal filters. Entry demanded endorsements from insiders, forming a sealed circuit. Outside the social sphere? Club doors stayed shut. No clubs, no chats on ventures. Females wielded vital yet overlooked influence. Mrs. Astor and her circle dictated familial eligibility. Their spouses then negotiated with those clans' males commercially. A woman's standing in society shaped her partner's commercial paths profoundly. This granted ladies vast sway they wielded discreetly. Boardrooms and enterprises barred them formally. Still, they governed the conduits powering those entities. The framework blended shrewdness and vice, shrewd in forging reliable alliances during a time of scant corporate rules and checks. Social endorsement implied commercial dependability. Vicious in barring the socially mismatched merit and morals be damned. Talented fellows missed chances because their partners skipped premier events. Into the 1890s end, advocates called for dealings based on ability over ties. Progressives advocated clearer company structures and controls. Yet the traditional setup endured. As commerce grew more structured, gala networks still unlocked paths credentials alone couldn't. Joseph Pulitzer, positioned there in 1889, grasped it all acutely. He'd purchased admittance via calculated philanthropy. Now, he aimed to turn societal footing into commercial edge. He engaged gentlemen subtly, avoiding direct talks, merely building rapport. Later, seeking legislative aid or ad contracts, those figures recalled him from Mrs. Astor's hall. They knew he fit in. Such recall proved priceless. Who controlled entry, though? Ward McAllister, dismissing riches as moot. Samuel Ward McAllister entered the world in Savannah, Georgia in 1827. He pursued legal studies. Practice never followed. He evolved into a rarer, mightier force, society's prime sentinel. His ascent was odd. In 1853, he wed Sarah Gibbons, a heiress. Her funds liberated him from work's demands. In the late 1850s, Mallister relocated to New York and quickly positioned himself as an essential ally to Caroline Astor. His singular talent lay in mastering social etiquette far beyond mere table manners. He grasped the intricate unspoken codes that dictated interactions, who could converse with whom, who held precedence, the proper way to handle introductions, whom to recognize, and whom to ignore. Centuries of European nobility had refined these conventions, and Mallister brought them across the Atlantic, imposing them on New York's elite with unwavering zeal. Caroline Astor required a figure like him. She comprehended influence, but was occupied with overseeing her estate and nurturing her family. Mallister took charge of the minutiae, curating invitation rosters, overseeing table placements, and upholding decorum. He served as her societal aide, her gatekeeper, her proxy in delicate confrontations. This partnership bestowed upon him immense influence. By regulating entry to Caroline's inner world, he effectively governed access to the nation's upper echelons. Securing his nod became vital for climbing the social ladder, while his rejection spelled banishment. In 1872, Mallister founded the Patriarchs, comprising 25 gentlemen tasked with coordinating exclusive dances at Delmonico's eatery. Attendance was restricted to lineages vetted by the group. This move institutionalized the subtle barriers that had previously operated behind the scenes, introducing a formal panel, codified guidelines, and recorded rejections. He delighted in his sway, granting interviews to justify the omission of particular clans. He penned essays on acceptable conduct and attire. In 1890, he released a volume called Society as I Have Found It, brimming with his audacious recollections and views. The work exposed his fixations, heritage, etiquette, continental benchmarks, and the necessity of barring the unworthy. His clout depended solely on Caroline Astor's support. Absent her patronage, he amounted to little more than a disgraced attorney subsisting on spousal funds. Yet backed by her quiet endorsement, his decrees carried absolute weight. If Mallister deemed you unfit, you were out. Any objection merely confirmed your ignorance of the norms. His boldest stroke came with the roster unveiled in the New York Times during February 1892, embodying the 400, the core families of consequence. After years of touting the concept, he disclosed concrete identities, 323 in total. He fell short of his touted figure, which eroded the list's foundation, yet it ignited a firestorm regardless. Certain households celebrated their inclusion, others reeled from their snub. The capriciousness of Mallister's selections laid bare. He embraced clans stripped of wealth, yet spurned fresh tycoons displaying flawless manners. He added infrequent participants while barring steadfast attendees. The guiding principle appeared to boil down to Hoditor quote 3. The outcry was fierce. Publications lampooned him relentlessly. Overlooked families aired grievances openly. Even those on the list felt unease at linking to such blatant favoritism. Mallister's once unassailable dominion now appeared laughable. Yet the framework endured. He faced derision and passed away in ignominy in 1895. But the 400 concept lingered. Caroline Astor's dominance persisted. The exclusionary practices he had structured remained, albeit with quieter scrutiny of their workings. Mallister's true brilliance lay not in inventing the hierarchy, Caroline Astor had already established it, but in cloaking rejection as methodical rather than whimsical. He lent capricious elite decisions an aura of impartial criteria. He convinced society of governing principles, even as the sole imperative was obedience to Mrs. Astor and himself. His sway over commerce flowed indirectly yet potently. He couldn't broker deals personally, but he could sabotage them by barring individuals from the elite circles where alliances formed. Should Mallister pronounce you persona non grata, your commercial avenues would shrink at once. Associates would pull away, intelligence flows would dry up, your offspring's matrimonial options would wane. Tycoons worth $50 million courted his favor, for ostracism rendered wealth less potent. You might command railways and financial institutions, but if your spouse missed key soirees, your ventures would find themselves iced out of the clandestine webs wielding true authority. Mallister wielded this influence masterfully. He shunned overt financial requests, too crass. Instead, clans contributed to his preferred causes. They funded his gatherings. They engaged him to advise on their soirees. The rewards came circuitously, but substantially. Mallister profited from his bond with Mrs. Astor, all while dodging any hint of greed. His character defects were glaringly theatrical, insufferably elitist to the edge of caricature, inflated with pride, devoid of introspection. His volume gathers dust today, capable of endless name-dropping and convoluted reasoning on the need for barring certain individuals to uphold vague ideals of quality that he left undefined. He truly viewed excluding the unfit as an ethical duty, oblivious to how he was merely imposing his personal biases. Still, he thrived. For more than 2 decades, he ranked as the second most influential figure in U.S. high society, surpassed only by Mrs. Astor. He held no governmental role, commanded no corporate domain, and boasted no creative legacy. His sole talent lay in deciding who gained entry to elite gatherings, and that proved sufficient. Upon his death in 1895, the elite world promptly erased him from memory. No statues, no enduring organizations in his honor. He functioned as a mere operative who fulfilled a role and then faded into irrelevance. Yet the framework he had codified, the selective barriers, the rosters, the capricious rejections rationalized through nods to undefined norms, outlasted him by far. Ward Mallister's roster carried more weight than fortunes in the bank. The evening Mamie Fish shattered every convention and faced no repercussions. Marion Graves, née Fish, embodied everything Ward Mallister detested: the arrogance, the affectation, the ludicrous worship of old-world conventions in a nation that had rebelled against such stratified orders. She regarded the entire apparatus as farcical drama. Thus, she resolved to dismantle it through lavish soirees. Mamie wed Stuyvesant Fish in 1876. He hailed from established wealth, Dutch patrician roots, flawless pedigree, all traits Mallister prized. His railroad-derived riches positioned him among America's richest. By conventional measures, Mamie ought to have epitomized the ideal socialite: proper heritage, boundless funds, fitting alliances. Yet she emerged as its saboteur. Her initial act of defiance was understated. Traditional society banquets dragged on for 4 or 5 hours, featuring numerous dishes, ornate displays, and interminable chit-chat that served as theater. Mamie declared her meals would clock in at precisely 50 minutes. Dishes arrived swiftly. Idle talk was minimized. Attendees dined and departed. Practicality trumped pomp. Time was honored, not squandered. The upper crust was outraged. Such meals were meant to flaunt idleness, proving one could afford to idle away hours. Hastening suggested loftier priorities elsewhere, signaling insufficient commitment to the rituals. But Mamie remained indifferent. Her swift suppers gained notoriety exactly for defying norms. She soon ramped up the provocation. In 1898, Mamie hosted a banquet honoring a genuine monkey as the star guest. Not some human in costume, a real simian perched at the table, dining off fine porcelain. Dubbed Alice, the creature donned a formal frock. Servants dished out its fare. It fumbled utensils, hurled bits of food, and chattered noisily. The assembled elite, including several of New York's top tastemakers, were compelled to act as if this were routine, engaging in courteous dialogue, overlooking the ape's soup-tossing antics. Mamie observed with glee as protocol experts faltered, striving to stay poised amid the primate's chaos. This feast served as her bold manifesto. The whole charade is preposterous. None of you are inherently superior. You're simply folks who've pledged to obey senseless edicts, and I'll demonstrate it by obliging you to converse earnestly with an ape, she pressed on. One legendary affair centered on a grand meal with an in-table aquarium as the focal point. Actual swans glided amid the serveware. Diners maneuvered discussions as the birds trumpeted and sprayed droplets on their attire. Once more, the ridiculousness doubled as critique. Her boldest bashes flipped hierarchies upside down. She'd summon her household staff to mingle as honorees while true socialites waited on them. This switch compelled all to grapple with the fragility of their standings. Maids and butlers, clad in their boss's best garb, lounged as society dowagers delivered plates. Certain visitors chuckled at the spectacle. Others squirmed at the unraveling of rank. Mamie's brilliance stemmed from her untouchability. Her bloodline was impeccable. Her spouse's assets were immense. Her ties were ironclad. She'd secured Mrs. Astor's and the core group's endorsement prior to launching her insurgency. Once the scheme dawned on others, barring her would have meant alienating swaths of the set alongside her. She grasped a key truth, too. Plenty privately despised the regime, but felt ensnared. Mamie offered them license to satirize it. Her galas turned into sanctuaries suspending societal codes, venues to deride the grandiosity, spots to admit the folly without full banishment. Ward Mallister abhorred her. He'd devoted years to sanctifying etiquette, only for Mamie to undermine it via apes and avians. He pushed for her ostracism, but wielded insufficient clout. Mrs. Astor, though disapproving of the escapades, couldn't sideline one so entrenched. Thus Mamie persisted, each event wilder than the prior. In 1900, she organized an extravagant affair known as the Dog's Dinner, featured pets of guests seated at the dining table, indulging in lavish multi-course meals while their human companions observed from the sidelines. The canines dined from exquisite porcelain plates, with servants presenting successive dishes. Certain hounds even donned formal attire. Newspapers chronicled the spectacle, complete with images of high society luminaries, gazing at their animals, savoring opulence funded by vast fortunes. The implication struck sharply. You're hardly unique. Your lavish banquets, your strict etiquette, your air of selectivity, it's mere theater, easily mimicked with beasts. The pups savored identical delicacies on matching dishware within the very chambers where you assert your prominence. So, what sets you apart? Mrs. Fish's gatherings exposed a perilous truth. The framework endured only through collective faith. When an insider lampooned it with skill, the edifice appeared brittle. And she demonstrated evening by evening that one could remain within the fold, yet disdain its gravity. Her sway expanded. Fellow elite women trimmed their soirees, others hosted intentionally offbeat bashes. The inflexible customs imposed by McAllister started to ease. Not entirely, to be sure. High society retained its codes, barred outsiders, and upheld its ranks. Yet Mrs. Fish sowed uncertainty. If a figure like her, with impeccable lineage, deemed it all laughable, perhaps it truly was. She loathed especially the idolization of European norms. The nation had battled for freedom, but elites kept aping old-world nobility. Mrs. Fish found this laughable. Her soirees championed Yankee chic. She'd summon ranch hands, performers, and folks clueless about silverware etiquette. At her table, wit outweighed pedigree. This stance was truly subversive in 1890s circles. The essence of the 400 lay in erecting barriers. One shunned the unfit to safeguard quality. Mrs. Fish contended the criteria were nonsensical. She wasn't merely flouting norms, she was probing their very rationale. Her signature line summed up her ethos: make it enjoyable. If it lacks joy, skip it. High society had never centered on amusement. It revolved around influence, rank, and securing one's spot. Pleasure was a side note, if that. By valuing delight, Mrs. Fish elevated encounters above hierarchy. Such a reversal imperiled the entire foundation. Still, she thrived. Her events achieved mythic status. Invites to Mrs. Fish's doze were coveted since the outcome was anyone's guess. It could unfold with poise, erupt in disarray, but it would linger in memory. Amid an age of unyielding decorum, the thrill of the unforeseen turned precious. By 1900, Mrs. Fish had established that one could embody society's core while critiquing it, adhere to sufficient conventions to hold your ground, yet shatter enough to satirize the spectacle. She'd pinpointed the boundary between tolerable and taboo, prancing along it with delight. Upon Mrs. Astor's passing in 1908, Mrs. Fish ascended as a pivotal tastemaker, not by honoring heritage, but by dismantling it. She'd illustrated that the order could adapt, that U.S. elites needn't echo European nobles, that affluence and clout didn't demand stuffiness or tedium. Her imprint proves tougher to quantify than those of Mrs. Astor or Alva Vanderbilt. She erected no enduring entities, she forged no mechanisms outlasting her, but she injected a subtler peril: skepticism. She validated that elite codes were capricious, their airs preposterous, their snobbery resting on little firmer than mutual consent to uphold the charade. That skepticism eroded elite sway. If insiders ridiculed the setup, why would outsiders revere it? Mrs. Fish never aimed to topple Gilded Age high society, but she hastened its fade by rendering it comical. And she managed this while hosting Manhattan's premier galas as Mrs. Fish regaled crowds with uproarious flair. Deep within the breakers, the grand hall crafted to overawe. Cornelius Vanderbilt II constructed the breakers in Newport, Rhode Island from 1893 to 1895. The estate ran $7 million, yet the ballroom symbolized more than mere expense. It embodied mental dominance in tangible form. Richard Morris Hunt, the nation's top designer, crafted the breakers following the fire that razed Cornelius's prior Newport residence. This iteration defied flames: steel skeleton, stone facade, non-combustible elements everywhere. Hunt's true brilliance lay in grasping that the breakers transcended a mere dwelling. It functioned as a device to dwarf entrance. The ballroom graced the structure's oceanfront end, spanning 40 feet across, 50 feet deep with 25-foot heights. Modest next to royal expanses, Versailles might scoff, but scaled ideally to evoke targeted mental impacts. Hunt arranged the layout so arrivals traversed the vast hall beforehand. That space soared. Three tales unfold around a grand marble staircase that pulls the gaze skyward. The sheer magnitude would weigh on you long before you stepped into the ballroom. Upon crossing the threshold into the main gathering area, the building's grandeur would already have humbled you. Inside the ballroom, Hunt employed every technique at his disposal. Its ceiling featured intricate paintings and coffered panels, so detailed that guests craned their necks to admire it, unwittingly shrinking themselves in the process. Along one wall stretched enormous mirrors that amplified the room's perceived vastness and bounced light around to suggest boundless expanse. These reflections also ensured you'd spot yourself repeatedly during the night, prompting endless self-inspections and a nagging sense of scrutiny. The sound design was meticulously planned. The room's proportions and surfaces shaped an auditory environment where chats in the middle stayed confidential amid the crowd. Yet noises from the room's borders traveled sharply to the core. Positioned at her welcoming spot, Caroline Vanderbilt could eavesdrop on whispers from the outskirts, while those on the fringes caught none of her exchanges. This sonic edge became a tool for gaining insights and influence. Hunt orchestrated the illumination, first with gas lamps, then electricity, to spotlight the room's heart. The spot where the Vanderbilts received shone most brilliantly. As one ventured outward, the glow faded gently. It wasn't overt enough to appear intentional, but sufficient to make the center feel like a stage under beams, with the margins slipping into softer dimness. Thus, the social order revealed itself via luminosity. The flooring consisted of intricate parquet oak arrangements, serving more than mere ornamentation. These motifs established visual paths that steered attention to the middle. Subtly, without awareness, attendees would align toward the space's nexus, invariably the host's domain. The layout channeled foot traffic along unseen routes. Along the wall overlooking the sea, Hunt installed French doors. In warmer months flung open, they merged the ballroom with an outdoor veranda, implying that Vanderbilts held sway over the chamber and the ocean beyond. Placed strategically, these portals offered flawless sea vistas from the center, whereas peripheral guests glimpsed only fragments. Central spots yielded ideal sights, outer ones blocked angles. Climate regulation served as yet another tactic. Though the mansion boasted advanced heating, it was tuned to warm the ballroom's core cozily, leaving the borders a touch chillier. Not enough for discomfort, that would betray the ploy, but just brisk sufficient to nudge visitors inward, chasing comfort and the presence of the hosts. Bodily ease thus shaped social alignments. The ballroom entryway was intentionally constricted, compelling arrivals to file in one by one for personal announcements. This bottleneck bred lines, heightening awareness of waiting, of eyes upon you, of the gravity of arrival. No one could blend into the Breakers ballroom anonymously. Each had to be proclaimed, scrutinized, evaluated. Carolyn Vanderbilt mastered leveraging Hunt's blueprint. She claimed the prime stance at the room's midpoint, under peak light and sonic clarity. Draped in pale gowns that caught and amplified the beams, she drew all eyes. Her soft-spoken words compelled listeners to draw near, fostering an air of closeness in even the most perfunctory talks. The space accommodated 400 revelers with ease, intimate for exclusivity, yet spacious for the elite. Drawing from Mrs. Astor's ballroom specs, Hunt mirrored the 400-person limit, affirming the Breakers' parity in societal stature. Yet the Breakers' ballroom transcended mere size. It crafted an ambiance where the Vanderbilt clan's preeminence seeped in through layered perceptions. The immensity dwarfed you. The sound setup handed them intel supremacy. The lights cast them in prominence as you lingered obscure. The warmth lured you closer. The mirrors stirred your vanity. The floor designs directed your steps. Each element was deliberate, the central rugs thicker than those at the rims. The seating elevated to enforce propriety over leisure. The art hung lofty, urging upward glances. The floral aromas renewed each day, invariably pristine. This buildup of sensations exerted mental strain. Hunt wove comparable mind games into other areas. The dining hall, sheathed in somber marble with a colossal hearth, evoked a cavernous sanctuary, lending gravity and weight to dinners. The library boasted soaring two-story heights and a mezzanine, accentuating height and diminishing personal scale. Every chamber in the Breakers was crafted to ear. It served as a stark reminder of the immense fortune and influence surrounding you. Developing that level of mental intricacy came at a steep price. For months, Hunt meticulously assessed viewpoints and sound dynamics. The components, marble sourced from Italy, timber from France, bespoke fittings, ran several times the expense of ordinary alternatives. The Breakers wasn't merely costly due to its scale. Every element was crafted to produce a deliberate impact, driving up the overall outlay. Ironically, Cornelius Vanderbilt had little chance to savor it. In 1896, only a year following the mansion's completion, he endured a stroke. He survived another 3 years, yet remained partly incapacitated, incapable of hosting gatherings. His spouse, Caroline, oversaw the ballroom for many years beyond his passing, employing Hunt's layout precisely as envisioned to showcase Vanderbilt authority and sustain their position atop the social ladder. Though the Breakers ballroom wasn't the grandest constructed in the Gilded Age, nor was the residence the priciest, Hunt's approach stood out for its profound mental engineering. While fellow designers focused on striking visuals, Hunt aimed for deeper influence over the psyche. He recognized that true societal dominance demanded more than mere opulence on display. It called for crafting spaces where affluence yielded unseen edges that guests sensed intuitively without grasping their source. Stepping into the Breakers ballroom, one struggled to pinpoint the reason for feeling overshadowed. The space gleamed with elegance, its dimensions balanced perfectly. No single feature appeared aggressively domineering, yet the combined influences, the vastness, the illumination, the echoes, the warmth, the visual alignments, fashioned a setting that favored the Vanderbilts entirely, leaving visitors at a clear disadvantage. Such was Hunt's brilliance. He rendered dominance seem organic and unavoidable rather than forced upon you. Today's sightseers exploring the breakers miss out on these subtleties to a degree. They pass through as casual observers rather than invitees under scrutiny. The illumination varies now. The groups alter the resonance. The subtle mechanism of the mind that Hunt devised functioned best under the guidance of proprietors who knew how to wield it. Carolyn Vanderbilt grasped this flawlessly. For 3 decades following Cornelius's demise, she leveraged that ballroom to uphold Vanderbilt preeminence within Newport's elite circles. The breakers demonstrated how structures could serve as tools of subtle warfare, not via walls or defenses, but through artful mental sway so refined that those affected remained unaware of the strings being pulled. Departing the breakers' ballroom, one emerged convinced of the Vanderbilts' inherent superiority. Rationalizing it proved elusive. Instinct simply affirmed it. That unshakable conviction formed the very essence embedded in Hunt's framework. Yet Newport represented just one arena of rivalry. Consider the Philadelphia Assembly, a realm where lineage overshadowed even vast riches. As New York elites clashed over fortunes amassed recently against those inherited from antiquity, Philadelphia had long settled the debate. Quote for now 4. The Philadelphia Assembly originated in 1748, not 1798, but 1748, prior to the Revolution, even before the United States took shape. Outlasting the nation itself, it ensured Philadelphia's upper crust never overlooked this antiquity. This event operated as a subscription dance, with participants covering yearly dues for 4 seasonal soirees. However, entry couldn't be purchased, no matter the sum. Access passed down through bloodlines, arrived via marriage to an insider, or stayed forever barred. Full stop. New York's renowned 400 offered selectivity. Philadelphia's assembly formed an unbreachable fortress. The Astors eventually welcomed the Vanderbilts. Philadelphia, by contrast, shunned all whose forebears hadn't set foot in America by 1776, and only if aligned correctly. By 1900, the roster mirrored the one from 1800 almost identically: Biddle, Cadwallader, Morris, Willing, Chew. These lineages traced back to Philadelphia's founding days. They had penned the Declaration of Independence. They had battled in the Revolution. They embodied America's noble class, rooted not in riches but in primacy. Even Andrew Carnegie, among the planet's wealthiest tycoons, failed to secure a spot for his daughter in the Philadelphia Assembly. His vast holdings and charitable endeavors bought no passage. Those Philadelphia clans dismissed Carnegie Steel outright. Their concern lay in your family's arrival date on these shores. Carnegie's origins as a Scottish newcomer marked his wealth as fresh, alien, utterly unacceptable. The very households that spurned Carnegie embraced kin who had squandered their inheritances. Poverty posed no barrier, provided your distant ancestor had endorsed the Constitution. You were in. Riches faded with time. Ancestry endured unchanging. The Assembly convened at Horticultural Hall and subsequently at the Academy of Music. The events themselves displayed striking restraint against New York's lavish spectacles. No ornate adornments, no themed disguises, simply waltzing in evening dress amid folks whose relations had intertwined for centuries. Such modesty was intentional. Among those perpetually affluent, fortune required no fanfare. The best-known tradition held that gentlemen steered the assembly. Ladies joined the festivities, but males dictated who gained admittance. A lady hailing from an assembly family marriages between Philadelphia's elite families and those from outside rarely integrated the newcomers into the inner circle. The gatekeepers, typically the men, would almost always say no. This led to an odd dynamic. Some of the nation's most influential figures ended up wed to women from Philadelphia's assembly lineage, yet they stayed forever on the periphery. Take Cornelius Vanderbilt II, who wed Alice Claypool Gwynn from a prominent Philadelphia clan. Alice gained entry to the assembly balls, but Cornelius was barred. His vast fortune meant nothing. His renowned surname carried no weight. He simply wasn't Philadelphia stock. New York high society chafed at this setup, unable to crack it no matter their tactics. In Manhattan, sufficient wealth and savvy could eventually force an opening. Alva Vanderbilt demonstrated that. Philadelphia, however, had no place for an Alva. It shunned anyone like her. Had Alva erected a grand marble estate in Philadelphia, the assembly households would have graciously overlooked it, and her. To Philadelphia's old guard, New York's scene seemed crude. The relentless jockeying for status, the lavish masked galas, the incessant press frenzy, all profoundly improper. True nobility avoided the spotlight. True nobility required no validation. True nobility just endured, rooted in centuries of unchallenged standing. The twist. Many Philadelphia inheritances paled in scale beside the fresh wealth they spurned. The Biddles enjoyed solid means, but nothing like Carnegie's scale. The Cadwaladers lived well, though not on Rockefeller's level. For Philadelphia's upper crust, lineage trumped ledger. They'd opt for modest purity over opulent ties to upstarts. This mindset forged a social order, worlds apart from New York's. There, the elite churned with flux as emerging riches ascended and legacies waned. In Philadelphia, the hierarchy stood immobile. The identical clans dominated the assembly in 1900 as in 1800. A few grew richer, others leaner, but the framework held firm. Philadelphia wasn't alone in this. Boston boasted parallel setups, colonial-era fortunes that repelled outsiders, wealth be damned. Charleston's circles echoed the pattern. Yet Philadelphia's model proved the strictest, its values most forthright. The lasting fallout hit the economy. As New York surged as the nation's money hub, Philadelphia lagged, in part because its society spurned the innovators and magnates who could have fueled growth. Carnegie erected his dynasty in Pittsburgh, not Philadelphia, partly since the city's elite signaled he was unwelcome. Fellow tycoons chased prospects to metropolises where cash unlocked access. By 1920, Philadelphia's assembly clans saw they'd walled off prosperity to safeguard social integrity. The city's stature had slipped, yet the assembly persisted, still selective, still scorning newcomers' gold, still prizing pedigree over success or riches. The assembly thrives even now, dominated by those same bloodlines under unchanged codes. Entry remains unpurchasable. In 2025, amid a nation claiming merit over birthright, the Philadelphia Assembly insists heritage reigns supreme. They've upheld it for 277 years, no signs of relenting. For Gilded Age aspirants clawing into New York's elite, Philadelphia embodied an even graver irritant. Triumph there, securing Mrs. Astor's nod, amassing the grandest estate, hosting the costliest soirees, still left Philadelphia unmoved. Certain barriers defied any fortune. That reality checked America's richest, underscoring limits to their sway. When the summonses ceased, it spelled immediate social oblivion. Emily Vanderbilt Sloan erred once back in 1898. She sought divorce. Her kin fought to halt it. The Vanderbilts wielded riches, influence, every edge. But in Gilded Age circles, splitting from a spouse equaled social ruin, and no amount of assets could avert the fallout. Emily had tied the knot with William Douglas Sloan in 1872. His pedigree was solid, furniture trade, solid estate, upstanding roots. Their union yielded 4 kids. From afar, it seemed solid, though privately it was torment. William dominated, perhaps cruelly. Emily bore it for 26 years before pursuing separation. The ruling arrived in 1899. Freedom at last, ruin too. No invite came from Mrs. Astor for the 1900 season, nor from the other matrons Emily had socialized with lifelong. Her name vanished from rosters. At open gatherings, erstwhile confidants averted eyes. Staff got orders to ignore her presence. She'd been excised. Divorce wasn't outlawed. By 1900, it wasn't scarce, either. Yet for females at the pinnacle, it was anathema. It implied you'd failed spectacularly at the singular role expected of women, upholding a marriage no matter the personal sacrifice. Even worse, it implied you valued your own well-being over communal expectations. Such a thing was unacceptable. Emily's girls bore the heaviest burden. They hadn't ended any unions. They bore no fault, yet they were marked by their connection to her. Potential suitors vanished. Households that once vied for ties to Vanderbilt wealth now shunned Emily's daughters. The ostracism passed down like an heirloom. Emily later wed Henry White, a seasoned envoy. Their union was said to be fulfilling, yet she couldn't reclaim her standing in elite circles. She endured another 27 years in affluence and ease, but utterly sidelined from society. The heiress raised amid Vanderbilt prestige, passed her later years overlooked by the very world that had once clamored for her presence. Her plight wasn't isolated. Social exile struck with disheartening frequency, often sparked by trivial missteps. James Hazen Hyde took over the Equitable Life Assurance Society in 1900 following his father's passing. At 23, with a fortune of $50 million, he yearned for acceptance among the elite. In January 1905, he hosted a grand ball at Sherry's restaurant, a themed affair evoking France, complete with costumes. It cost $200,000, drew 200 attendees, and was extravagant beyond measure. The issue lay in the moment. The prior year had exposed huge frauds in the insurance sector. Clients suffered losses as leaders pocketed gains. Hyde's celebration, bankrolled by those very earnings, appeared as outright plunder. Backlash erupted swiftly. Papers published satirical drawings of Hyde reveling while claimants went hungry. High society deserted him in an instant. Those who had joined the event, every one of them, now professed shock at the opulence. They insisted they had only participated from a sense of duty. They deemed it tasteless. Hyde, believing he was solidifying his status, had instead shattered it. He escaped to France in banishment, residing there for the remainder of his days, shunning New York circles forever. The Ulrich clan weathered a scandal in 1897 but couldn't fully rebound. Hermann Ulrich commanded a shipping empire and was wed to Teresa Fair, daughter of a Nevada silver magnate who amassed millions. They ought to have been unassailable in social ranks. Yet Hermann faced commercial woes. Whispers of insolvency spread. The gossip proved unfounded, but sufficient to damage. Social calls dwindled, then ceased. The Ulrichs upheld their grand residence. Their finances remained intact, but their prominence waned. Teresa battled fiercely to hold their ground, staging ever more sumptuous gatherings and pouring out funds. It availed nothing. When elite opinion labeled you as slipping, the slide turned inevitable. Folk steered clear to evade links to downfall. The harshness served a purpose. High society required stark warnings of the fallout from breaching norms or merely turning burdensome. Emily Vanderbilt Sloane's story illustrated the penalty for favoring individual joy over collective demands. James Hazen Hyde's episode revealed the cost when indulgence drew public scorn. The wealthy learned the repercussions of seeming fiscally vulnerable. The fallout registered in financial terms. Ventures crumbled as status evaporated. Once excluded from polite company, associates would subtly withdraw. Not due to any shift in your commercial savvy, it remained the same. But linking with a social pariah risked tainting one's own reputation. Thus, agreements faltered. Alliances broke apart, prospects dissolved. For females, the risks loomed larger. A shunned woman lost the ability to secure matches for her offspring. Daughters stayed single, spelling financial instability in that time. Sons encountered narrowed paths in commerce. The lineage, meant as a boon, morphed into a curse. Wealth could be safeguarded. Emily Vanderbilt Sloane escaped want, but it couldn't fuel influence or rank. The mental strain outstripped the material losses. Individuals immersed in elite life from birth, familiar with no other realm, awoke to abrupt isolation. They might spot old companions at the theater and receive the cold shoulder. They gathered at services, yet sat solitary. They organized soirees that drew empty chairs. The solitude was total and intentional. Certain outcasts departed New York altogether. Hyde chose France. Some relocated to California or across the Atlantic, places distant from the cutters, allowing fresh starts where exclusion didn't shadow every corner. Yet others lingered. They preserved their estates. They retained their servants. They mimicked the rituals of high life absent its core. They haunted their own abodes like specters, upholding ornate veneers as the influential feigned their non-existence. The elite's authority thrived on such precedents. All in those circles recalled Emily Vanderbilt Sloane's fate. They remembered James Hazen Hyde. They were aware of clans severed for assorted infractions. These stark lessons, discipline was rigorously enforced. The mere thought of defiance recalled the dire fates awaiting those who strayed. The regulations appeared capricious precisely because they were. One might face ostracism for a failed marriage, an ill-conceived gathering, a corporate mishap, or simply because an influential figure deemed you a nuisance. This unpredictability bolstered the regime's grip. Without clarity on what might invite social ruin, caution governed every action. By 1900, the mechanism had demolished far more reputations than it had ever boosted. For each Alva Vanderbilt who clawed her ascent, countless Emily Vanderbilt Sloanes endured banishment. The specter of rejection enforced compliance more potently than any lure of acceptance. Riches offered no shield. The Vanderbilts, heirs and Ulris, bore titles that ought to have been unassailable, yet high society demonstrated its power to dismantle even them. If a Vanderbilt could face excision, no one was safe. That truth ensured universal adherence. The ultimate harshness lay in the enduring nature of social oblivion. Emily found no resurgence. Hyde never re-emerged. Once severed, the cut was irrevocable. No atonement or reinvention could restore favor. You might atone, transform, fulfill every societal edict. It changed nothing. The blemish endured eternally. This unyielding quality was vital to the structure's efficacy. Were banishment fleeting, some might gamble on it. But recognizing its permanence, the legacy it imposed on offspring and descendants, the utter absence of absolution, that awareness forged total dominion. To sustain its selectiveness, society required a means to prune its ranks without seeming whimsical. Ostracism supplied that tool, framing exclusions as justified penalties. You weren't cast out arbitrarily. You'd erred through separation, impropriety, disgrace, or frailty. That myriad others committed parallel offenses unscathed meant little. Your selection as a cautionary figure sufficed. Yet a single extravagance would overshadow them all, the Bradley Martin Ball, the gala that shuttered an epoch. February 10, 1897, the Waldorf Hotel Ballroom. Cornelia Bradley Martin orchestrated what stood as the costliest affair in U.S. annals. Unbeknownst to her, it marked the close of an age. The Bradleys and Martins traced their roots to colonial wealth, honorable lineages, solid estates. Their union had merged two esteemed clans. They appeared unassailable. But Cornelia craved beyond mere stability. She yearned for lasting fame. She aimed to host an event of such grandeur it would echo through the ages. She achieved notoriety, though scarcely in her envisioned form. Cornelia selected the motif, Versailles' royal court. Attendees were to don attire evoking French elites from the eve of revolution. The paradox of honoring nobles mere steps from the guillotine evidently escaped her. The motif would soon prove prophetically grim. Invites dispatched in late January numbered 1,200. Dress codes demanded precision, fidelity to history, and opulent outlays. Cornelia planned to embody Mary, Queen of Scots. Her daughter would portray Pocahontas. The motifs clashed, yet the lavishness shone through. New York's upper echelons frenzy ensued in readiness. Attires ran into thousands apiece. Certain households shelled out 10,000 for one ensemble. Jewelers toiled around the clock on era-true adornments. Couturiers filled schedules months ahead. Rivalry to outshine in splendor gripped the affluent. The issue hinged on the moment. 1896 had wrought economic devastation. A slump ensnared the nation. Joblessness soared to 20%. Labor disputes and turmoil ravaged manufacturing hubs. Vast multitudes of citizens teetered on famine as the prosperous geared up to lavish sums on finery. Media chronicled the buildup with mounting indignation. Publications tallied expenditures. Funds poured into Bradley Martin garb could sustain 15,000 households annually. Satirical sketches depicted famished laborers eyeing the opulent in gems. Outrage swelled nationwide. Clergy delivered homilies decrying the profligacy. Union heads rallied demonstrations. Everyday New Yorkers, barely scraping by, absorbed tales of fetes tallying hundreds of thousands and seethed. The Bradley Martin Ball crystallized the era's glaring disparities. Cornelia remained insulated. She viewed the publicity as validation of her event's mythic status. She failed to grasp the ire in those reports, mistaking scorn for acclaim. So cocooned in elite circles, she couldn't fathom external perceptions. February 10th dawned. Safeguards at the Waldorf reached extraordinary levels. Authorities fretted over potential upheavals. 200 revelers streamed in, clad in ensembles and baubles totaling millions. The venue's grand hall mimicked Versailles anew. Blooms blanketed all corners. Musicians performed. Bubbly cascaded. Cornelia's attire appraised at $60,000. Her loaned Tiffany gems tallied $200,000. She adorned with a profusion of rubies and diamonds. She appeared as a monarch on the verge of execution, seemingly oblivious to any contradiction. The other outfits proved just as lavish. Mrs. John Jacob Astor appeared as Marie Antoinette. August Belmont arrived costumed as Louis XIX. Bradley Martin himself donned a suit of gilded armor. That evening, the total worth of attire and gems filling the ballroom surpassed $5 million, all in a nation where typical laborers made only $400 annually. The celebration extended until 3 a.m. Attendees swirled across the dance floor, imbibed freely, and staged intricate living pictures. Accounts from the time describe it as magnificent. Cornelia was ecstatic. She had realized her vision, the nation's most buzzed-about event. Come morning, though, she learned the true cost of such notoriety. Headlines nationwide blasted scathing critiques. The New York World branded it the disgrace of the era. Clergy spent full sermons denouncing the opulence. Union organizers seized on it for outreach. Observe how the elite squander fortunes amid your hardship. Elected officials, attuned to widespread outrage, vowed probes. Soon after, assessors showed up. New York City hiked the valuation of the Martin holdings. The resulting levy jump proved crippling, $30,000 extra each year. Similar hikes hit in other locales. The Martins, rooted in New York for ages, abruptly found the city unlivable. High society shunned them. Those very individuals who had joined the gala, and nearly everyone had, now professed shock. They insisted they'd only participated to spare the Martins' feelings. They deemed it vulgar. In mere weeks, the Martins had become social pariahs. Commercial fallout ensued. Bradley Martin's ventures encountered hurdles. Associates pulled away. Agreements unraveled. The family's long-standing financial security started crumbling fast. Come May 1897, they reached their choice. Departure from America it would be. They relocated to London for good, merging with the circle of U.S. expatriates escaping reputational ruin. Their remaining days unfolded overseas, undone by one extravagant affair. Cornelia remained perplexed about her misstep. To her, it was merely a grand soiree, the sort expected among the elite. Plenty of others hosted costly bashes, plenty flaunted over-the-top jewels. So why singled out? The key lay in circumstances and moment. In prior times, such an event might have earned acclaim, yet by 1897, the chasm between rich and destitute had widened to a point where ostentatious shows ignited fury instead of envy. The Bradley Martin affair simply crossed that threshold for endurance. Crucially, it unfolded amid accumulated outrages that had undermined elite credibility. Think insurance frauds, rail tycoon abuses, banking failures. Citizens had seen the affluent wreck fortunes for gain while preaching virtue. The ball shattered any lingering facade. It showed that Gilded Age extravagance had boundaries after all. Those boundaries arose not from within. Left unchecked, the upper crust would have persisted endlessly. The boundaries came from without. When wealth parades grew so brazen they risked unrest, stoking fury that might erupt into chaos, even the privileged had to retreat. Post-February 1897, the social landscape shifted. Gatherings turned subtler. Press attention waned. The phase of rivalrous splendor, who could host the priciest gala, who could don the flashiest gems, drew to a close. Not from some newfound ethics, but because indulgence now carried peril. The Martins served as the offering to safeguard the order. By banishing them, the elite conveyed, We recognize the overreach. We're dealing with the culprits. No need for street upheavals. Consider it resolved. The offering succeeded. Outrage ebbed, though the warning lingered. Parade your riches too boldly, and you'd fall to shield the rest. Cornelia Bradley Martin yearned for enduring fame. She got it, yet as an emblem of all that ailed Gilded Age circles, the obliviousness, the indulgence, the utter rift from everyday U.S. existence. Her event toppled her lineage and hastened an age's close. The norms had transformed irrevocably. What endured? Echoes of Gilded Age exclusivity persist now. The grand homes have vanished. The brownstone on 355th Avenue lies razed. The Breakers stand as a museum today. Those invitation-only halls, once priceless in allure, mostly vanished by the 1930s, supplanted by condos and lodgings. Yet the mechanisms forged in those spaces? They persisted. They evolved. The Met Gala unfolds each May within the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Seats run $75,000 apiece, though they're unsellable. Vogue's Anna Wintour curates the roster herself. Attendance hinges on her nod. No invite, no entry. The cost means little. Entry turns on Wintour's favor, not funds. Ring any bells? It's like Mrs. Astor's salon, with star power standing in for tycoon wealth. The original list of 400 morphed into whoever can squeeze into the Metropolitan Museum of Art's elite circles. The underlying purpose stays the same. It fosters rarity, upholds prestige, and makes sure that having money isn't enough to get in. Approval from a key decision-maker is essential. This dynamic pervades today's high society scene. In Manhattan, cooperative apartment boards turn away tycoons because they lack the right pedigree. It's not a financial issue. The spurned applicants are loaded. The goal is to dictate membership. Certain co-op panels wield more authority than Mrs. Astor ever did, since there's no way to bypass them through construction. Approval is mandatory, or you're out. Admissions to private schools in Manhattan echo the rigid hierarchies of the Gilded Age. Families shell out fortunes on advisors to tackle the hurdles. Family ties carry huge weight. If your folks went there, your kids get a leg up. Generous gifts can smooth the path, yet they don't secure a spot. These institutions dictate entry to connections that shape professional paths. Skip the ideal preschool, and your kids' prospects shrink. It's essentially the 400 for toddlers. Exclusive country clubs enforce overt barriers. Plenty still limit access to members only, mirroring those old-era limits. You require endorsements from current insiders. They scrutinize your history. Committees deliberate on your bid. A no means forever shut out. The terms have shifted. We avoid calling folks unfit now, but the essence endures. Corporate spheres kept the informal negotiation style alive via new frameworks. Think private equity outfits, hedge funds, and VC groups. These fields thrive on connections that mimic Gilded Age cliques. Introductions are crucial. Prior ties matter. Someone must endorse you. Pure skill falls short. You must enter the spaces where agreements form. The tech world acts like it's all about talent, yet it follows the identical blueprint. Y Combinator takes under 2% of candidates. Once accepted, you tap into networks valued at millions. Rejected, you're scraping by on your own. Paul Graham and his team gatekeep Silicon Valley's core as thoroughly as Mrs. Astor managed her dance floor invites. Social platforms follow suit with their own filters. Verified badges on Instagram or the blue marks on Twitter represent online equivalents of the 400 roster. They mark you as significant, authenticated by the site. No badge, you're invisible. The tools vary, but the process of classifying folks into tiers persists. The wording has softened for cover. Bloodlines aren't discussed. It's cultural alignment instead. Unsuitable vanishes. We opt for not matching our principles. We deny recreating noble barriers. Instead, we insist on upholding quality. Step into any top-tier organization, though, and you'll see controls that would impress Ward McAllister. The mental framework endured unchanged. Limited supply builds worth. Universal access cheapens it. Thus, groups invent shortages, capping spots, curbing entry, guaranteeing that belonging denotes prestige. The 400's allure wasn't superior lineage, it was the cap on numbers. Today's parallels grasp this flawlessly. The connection-building strength persists. Rubbing shoulders in top groups still unlocks deals. Hit the key events, sign up for select groups, score spots at exclusive meals, and you gain insights and bonds that boost achievements. Stay sidelined, and victory is possible, but tougher. The Gilded Age demonstrated how social entry yields financial gains. Current high society preserves that link. The fallout from being shut out lingers. Exclusion from premier spots doesn't trigger the total isolation Emily Vanderbilt Sloan endured, but it inflicts genuine setbacks. Paths falter, chances evaporate. Thriving beyond the establishment works, yet the setup favors insiders. That edge is exactly what Gilded Age structures offered. What's different now is open admission. Back then, it was unabashedly elite. We voiced the unspoken truth. Certain individuals outrank others and choose the rest. Today's version delivers identical outcomes under a merit-based guise. We act like choices are impartial, even as they're as capricious as Caroline Astor's guest picks. The slickest current twist integrates controls into outfits that preach openness. Prestigious colleges tout inclusivity while favoring alumni offspring. Firms boast talent-based hiring but draw mainly from top institutions. The barriers start upstream, pre-application, rendering them unseen and tougher to contest. Caroline Astor grasped a core truth. Power over belonging is constant, control over society at large. She required no governmental influence or corporate dominion. Her leverage lay simply in regulating entry to venues where the influential converged. Today's counterparts, from Anna Wintour to cooperative housing committees to Y Combinator investors, exert identical sway via comparable methods. Such structures endure precisely because they fulfill a purpose. People crave structure in social ranks. We yearn to distinguish the significant from the insignificant. In eras lacking official nobility, we invent subtle equivalents to achieve identical ends. We merely act as if we're above it. The Gilded Age openly embraced its selectivity. Contemporary upper-class norms conceal that very selectivity beneath rhetoric of achievement-based access and inclusivity. Yet, step inside the Met Gala, attempt to purchase a spot in a Fifth Avenue co-op, or submit an application to a top-tier preschool, and you'll find Mrs. A's specter thriving. She's simply grown adept at withholding the roster. The grand estates have become exhibits. The dance halls have been raised, yet the barriers persist ubiquitously, functioning with Gilded Age precision and contemporary defensible ambiguity. We remain poised for summons that define our value. We've merely ceased confessing that's our pursuit, the genuine price of admission. 1893. That youthful figure, Carrie Astor, weeping in gratitude upon receiving the coveted note. She wed advantageously, raised a family, enjoyed security, yet devoted her days chasing validation from those whose sole authority rested in selecting room occupants. The summonses demanded no vast sums. They held value in the millions. That nuance is crucial. When items demand millions, you hold the option to decline. But when their worth reaches millions, when your prospects hinge on obtaining one, refusal isn't possible. You'll resort to any measure to secure it. You'll yield to capricious dominance. You'll adhere to illogical protocols. You'll uphold frameworks that injure you, since abandoning them invites isolation. Gilded Age circles grasped this dynamic flawlessly. The gatherings weren't mere celebrations. They engineered an urgent craving for a rarity doled out by a select few. Having instilled that craving, control over the aspirants became effortless. Today's privileged spheres mirror this exactly. We've fostered urgent longing for entry into specific institutions, districts, or connections. Then we empower sentinels to regulate that entry. We insist it's tied to talent, criteria, or compatibility. In truth, it's dominion. It always was. The expense isn't monetary, it's liberty. It's yielding your discernment to another's whimsical verdict on your suitability. It's devoting existence to courting endorsement from those unfit to bestow or withhold it. Mrs. Astor's venue has vanished, but the apparatus persists as we relentlessly rebuild it. We continually erect arrangements where a minority governs passage to essentials coveted desperately by the rest. We persist in feigning those arrangements are impartial when they're every bit as whimsical as a hall's limits. Perhaps grasping the past illuminates the now more sharply, as you await word on acceptance to the ideal academy, position, or community. You're essentially in Carrie's shoes, anticipating the decree. The risks may vary. The apparatus does not. Those venues where summonses equaled fortunes have been torn down. But we linger at the threshold, yearning for passage, oblivious that the portal we covet might never merit existing. If this probe into Gilded Age dominance proved insightful, think about signing up for updates. Narratives on the construction and endurance of privileged frameworks hold greater import than we typically grant. Your backing enables further delves into these topics. The summonses ceased for the masses ages ago, yet their legacies still shape us all. Recognizing those legacies marks the initial move toward challenging if we ought to sustain them.